picking up with Seafarer, line 72. So, finished the Wanderer, hoping to finish the Seafarer fairly quickly, and then getting into Dream of the Rood and try to get us back on track. I'm going to back up just a little bit. The Seafarer says, or whoever is speaking, line 58, and so now my thought flies out from my breast, my spirit moves with the sea flood, etc., etc. Okay? He goes on and talks about he can't believe, top of page 69, line 66b, I will never believe that earthly goods will endure forever. Sounds kind of like what that we discussed on today's Monday, so Wednesday. That passage in The Wanderer where the speaker says several things are fleeting. Here man is fleeting, here woman is fleeting, here wealth is fleeting, here joy is fleeting, here friends are fleeting, all this life is fleeting here on earth. And the word that gets translated as fleeting, as I mentioned, was, there it goes again, lana, which can mean lone, fleeting, transitory, impermanent, etc. It can also mean lean, like in lean meat, right? So, he then goes on and says, 68, for everyone, one of three things is coming. Okay? Illness, old age, I'm throwing in the old, but age, or death by sword. Those are the three ways of dying, essentially, the speaker says. From one doomed to die, and the Old English word there for doomed to die, if I remember correctly, just to make sure, find Seafarer 71, should be, yep, figum. F-ash-um, G-U-M. This word gets used a lot in heroic poetry, and it essentially means one that weird is about to hit. Okay? Remember weird, that which will be or what will be the thing that you cannot escape. For one doomed to die, if it's your time, one of these things is going to get you. All right? And so, that's that forthon. And which can mean therefore, because, since, a variety of things. For every man, the praise of posterity, those coming after, that's what posterity means, is the best eulogy. Okay? What those who live after us can say about us, that's the best thing that can be said. That before he must be on his way, okay, that is before you must die, what? He act bravely on earth against the enemy's malice, do bold deeds to beat the devil. So the sons of men will salute him afterwards. That's what the speaker, the seafarer, is saying will produce a good eulogy. So-and-so died doing what? He acted bravely on earth against the enemies, plural, not enemies singular, enemies plural, malice. Did, I'm putting past tense, bold deeds to beat the devil. What are bold deeds to beat the devil? How do you beat the devil? Is this like, what's the devil went down to Georgia song, and you pull out your fiddle and you try and beat him that way? Is this a Mephistophelian, Faustian thing where you try to trick the devil? No. The bold deeds to beat the devil are what the speaker has been doing all his life on his journey. Literally within the world of the poem, in the boat, on the ocean, by himself, doing what? The speaker said more than once, trying, proving, testing himself. Okay? It's what is called an ascetic feat, or a feat of a feat of asceticism. To be an ascetic means self-denial. Okay? You deny yourself something for what purpose? Just because, it's not like going on a diet. You fast for ascetics for what purpose? To subdue the body to the spirit, so that the body doesn't control one. Okay? Those are the bold deeds against the devil. Why? Traditional Christian theology, church fathers, etc. The devil likes people fat. For the simple reason, if they're fat, if they respond only to food, seemingly, or essentially, then that's where all their focus will be on. And they won't focus on anything beyond the here and now, the right now, the pleasures of the flesh, so to speak, or the body. So, he acted bravely on earth against the enemy's malice, to do bold deeds to beat the devil. Why? So the sons of men will salute him afterwards. Now, this is an enigmatic passage, because so that the sons of men will salute him afterwards might mean that eulogy, that good word after so-and-so is dead, okay? Or it might mean afterwards in heaven. The saluting afterwards doesn't mean, this kind of salute. It means welcoming praise. Like so-and-so goes through the proverbial pearly gates, and it's like, John has made it. Susan has gotten out. She's free, etc. And the reason it's partly enigmatic is because of the next line. So that the sons of men will salute him afterwards, and his praise thereafter live with the angels forever and ever. What kind of praise do you want to have? Metaphorically speaking. The kind that lives with the angels forever and ever, or the good word by people down here. Which, if you saw the film Coco that we referred to the other day, what if people down here forget about you? You disappear. But if the praise is with the angels forever and ever, you never disappear. I'm Orthodox, like Russian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, etc. The phrase that people use when someone dies is, may his, her memory be eternal. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't mean the dead person's memory. Why? Because the dead person's dead. Down here speaking doesn't have a memory anymore. It means may the memory of that person be eternal. Why? Because if it's eternal, the person lives on. Now, down here, theologically it means something very, very different. It means may God remember that person. Because if God doesn't forget you, what does that mean? You're always existing. Just depends, which of the two places. Because in traditional Christian theology, there is no annihilation, so to speak, of the soul. So the sons of men will salute him afterwards, and his praise thereafter live with the angels forever and ever in the joy of eternal life, delight among heaven's host. Delight, pleasure. All right? Pause. And if I remember, I think there is a break in the manuscript. Not like there's a line or line and a half missing, but like an actual pause. Because there's my mouth's going faster than my brain. There is a slight shift. I almost said something else. The days are lost, and all the pomp of this earthly kingdom. Meaning, time's up. Not literally, oh, the time has run out and it's, proverbial judgment day. The days are lost. Lost there essentially means time's running downhill. It's not getting any better. The pomp of this earthly kingdom, What do we mean by pomp? You know, every year, graduation around the country, around the world probably, Elgar's Pomp and Circumstance is played. What's the pomp in Pomp and Circumstance? You've got this huge ceremony. People are dressed to the nines. They're going to have a big, huge party, so to speak. That, gone. Again, think of the time frame. Poem could be written, probably composed, anytime between 700 or so and 950, 975. What might the speaker have in mind? Same kind of thing the wanderer had in mind. Look at these ruins. The glory of the Caesars, gone. Okay? There are now neither kings, nor emperors, nor gold givers, as there once were. And if I remember right, I think the word for emperor is Caesar. Okay? We don't live in the golden age, do we? We live, whatever, comes after gold that's rotted, etc. When is the proverbial golden age? When was the golden age of the United States? According to some, at least. The founding era, the founders. There's all this stuff going on, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, of, the guys that Musk has working for him, digging into the bowels of the financial stuff of the government. And they're all between 19 and 20, these five that have been named, 19 and 25. There's like a 19-year-old, a 20, 21, and people are like, these are just kids, don't know what they're doing. Look at the ages of the founders. Alexander Hamilton was like 20. James Madison, who wrote most of the Constitution, was 19 in 1776. What have I done in 63 years? There aren't kings and emperors like there used to be, nor gold givers. So we're not talking about the ancient world gold givers, Anglo-Saxon kings, because the gold giver is the Lord, the king, as there once were, when they did the greatest glorious deeds and lived in most lordly fame. All this noble host is fallen. There aren't any like that anymore. Their happiness lost, the weaker ones remain and rule the world. The word there for weaker is not weaker. It's Wirser, W-Y-R-S-E-R, the worser. There's a difference between being worst and weakest. Worst implies there's also kind of a moral falling. Weak can just be, your body wastes away. There's no blame in that. Moral fallings, however, there's a lot of blame to be labeled or given. The weaker ones remain and rule the world. Okay, so imagine you're an Anglo-Saxon king and some poet in your kingdom, whether we're talking about the great king or a lesser king, writes this poem and says, I want to sing this in your hall. And he says these lines. All the great kings are dead, their glory is dead, and all we have now are the worser ones, and they rule the world. You're a king, or you're a lord, and you hear that, that's kind of like, he just dissed me. He just said I am no good. Laboring and toiling, joy is laid low. The earth's nobility grows old and withers. The nobility, the aristocracy. Now, there is no aristocracy per se at the time this is written. I mean, you don't have lords and ladies, you don't have nobles, you don't have dukes, you don't have earls and counts and all that. All that comes much, much later, okay? But what it does mean is all those who are born to important families, because you did have that, the king, the king's sons, the king's brother and sister and their children, okay? They are all high status. Even they the speaker is saying. Okay? Do what? They grow old and wither. What is that implying? What either are they not doing, or what have they not done? They've not reproduced. There's not more. It's like the line is dying out. Like every man throughout Middle Earth. Remember when I said Wednesday, J.R.R. Tolkien in his essay on Beowulf said, all of Anglo-Saxon literature is about one major theme, the death of humanity, man, and all his works. Just like all humans, every man is what? Growing old and withering. You might be 20 years old, the speaker is saying, you don't know it yet. You're growing old and you're withering. What's the implication? I mean, growing old and withering leads to what? Death, okay? We're all dying, the speaker is saying. Old age overtakes him, his face grows pale, the gray beard grieves, he knows his old friends, offspring of princes, have been given up to the earth, they're all dead. It's almost like the seafarer is talking about, and this is not literal, okay, the metaphor, talking about his friend, the wanderer. Had a beer last week and he was telling me, everybody he's known is dead. He buried his Lord. When his life fails him, his fleshly cloak will neither taste the sweet nor touch the sour. How many of you have seen the first Pirates of the Caribbean? Most of you. You remember the scene?
Sorry. Just in time.
When they're on the Pearl and Captain Barbossa, it's nighttime and his pirates are kind of partying, so to speak, and he grabs a bottle of ale or something and he drinks it, and then he stands in the moonlight where you can see he's actually like a skeleton and we see the stuff flowing through, okay, and he makes a comment. It has no flavor. He eats an apple and it's nothing, okay. His fleshly cloak will neither taste the sweet nor touch the sour.
Touch the sword?
Soar, S-O-R-E. Nor move a hand, nor think with his mind. Why? Because dead men don't do nothing. That's why. Though a brother may wish to strew his brother's grave with gold, bury him among the dead with heaps of treasure to take with them, traditional, pagan, Anglo-Saxon culture. We have multiple burials that have been found, some in just the last couple of years. There's usually one found about once a year or once every 2 years, and about once every 5 or 10 years, there's a major burial discovered with a bunch of treasure, okay? Why do you do that? According to anthropologists, well, it's to help the guy on his journey to the other world. He needs gold to pay off whatever. Probably not the case at all, by the way. He does this to honor the dead brother. Though a brother may wish to strew his brother's grave with gold, bury him among the dead with heaps of treasure to take with him. So the speaker is saying, this is the ideology that many people have, that you can take it all with you. That gold will be useless before the terror of God for any soul that is full of sin. You're not going to be able to pay off God if you lived a sinful life, the speaker is saying. Okay? When we get up to late medieval, early Renaissance, and we talk a little bit about Calvinism and some other stuff, and doctrine of original sin versus doctrine of grace and works and things like that, there are going to be people who say, yes, you can. You can buy off God. You buy a piece of paper from the Catholic Church called an indulgence. That gets you time out of purgatory. Literally. Okay? So, he says, that gold will be useless for any soul that is full of sin, the gold he had hidden while here on earth. When we read Beowulf, one of the reasons Beowulf wants to go after the dragon, or one of the reasons Beowulf wants to kill the dragon, is he knows the dragon has a hoard of treasure. And he wants to be able to take that treasure out and give it to his people, distribute it to his people. Okay? We'll talk about why that's important when we get there. So the speaker goes on. Great is the terror of God before which the earth trembles. He established the sturdy foundations, that is, made the world, the earth's solid surface and the high heavens. Genesis 1:1, God created the heavens and the earth. Foolish is he who dreads not the Lord. Death will find him unprepared. Unprepared. Okay? So, gold isn't going to prepare you. Grave goods aren't going to prepare you. How do you prepare? Those of you who are in my Shakespeare class, when we get to Hamlet, Hamlet's going to have a line where he's thinking about the possibility of death, and he's going to say, the readiness is all. Meaning, the being ready for death every moment of one's life. That's what's important. When I do my Harry Potter class, I tell the students, I think the Harry Potter books are all about one theme, how to die well. They're all about teaching Harry how to die. Whether it's at 11 years old or 17 years old, or 63 years old, or 22, or whatever the age is. Foolish is he who dreads not the Lord, death will find him unprepared. Blessed is he who lives humbly, mercy from heaven comes to him. Humbly, lives with humility. In other words, doesn't do what that the wanderer also warns against. Bingo. Boasting. Before knowing where the thoughts of the mind will turn and such. Okay? The maker strengthens his spirit, that is the spirit of the humble one. Why? For he, the humble one, believes in his, the maker's, might. In other words, trusts God to control things, to work things out, so to speak. A man must steer a strong mind and keep it stable. Steer, like, here's your mind and you've got a steering wheel to it. Because if you don't have a steering wheel to it, what can happen?
You do bad stuff, immoral stuff.
Because you don't think before acting. Or maybe even sometimes you do think before acting and you need something to steer away from the actions one is going to take. Steadfast in its promises, pure in its ways. Every man must hold in moderation his love for his friend and his hatred for a foe. That's similar to what the wanderer says about neither this, nor this, nor this, nor this. So what does that mean? You must hold in moderation your love for a friend and hatred for a foe. Why should you be moderate in your love for a friend?
What is their idea of a love for a friend, or like what would all that entail? Like
Friendship. Just it's not romantic or erotic love, that kind of thing. Keep going. What do you mean by that? What? Okay.
Is this
Like your friends are also gonna die, and like all that's still fleeting, so it's probably
True.
the design mechanism.
All those are true.
if it's supposed to love God more?
Yes.
If this is still holding,
Think of that fourfold Germanic ethic.
if this is still holding till your friend dies,
The
you have to
avenging
avenge
your
them.
friend thing?
The whole vengeance thing.
Don't lose.
Duty to one's Lord, duty to one's kin. That's friend is implied in there. I mean, after all, what is one of the names for the Lord? Gold friend. Okay? So, I mean, it could mean, the friend there could mean that literal Lord. So you have to be moderate, because if you're not moderate in your love for your friend, what might that call upon you to do? Offend your friend. Vengeance is whose? Says the Old Testament. God's, not ours. Notice, this is in direct contradiction to, what I had over here, the full for Germanic ethic. Okay? So, his love for a friend and his hatred for a foe. Why should you hold your hatred for a foe in moderation?
I go crazy.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the term? I'm going to spell it how it's literally spelled. Berserker. Berserker literally means bare shirt-er.
And weren't they like, they wore animal pelts because that gave them the power of animals, or?
It wasn't the animal pelt that gave them the power of animals. It was getting totally drunk. These are Viking warriors who, before they would go into battle, would get drunk and or get high. Yeah.
And that helped them?
Yeah, because you're not thinking about yourself at all.
Okay.
You just go and, not good to be, the best friend of the guy going totally, crazy, swinging a sword or axe, etc. Because, again, you're high, you're stoned. You're not going to recognize a friend.
Would there be friendly fire?
Oh, there are lots of friendly fire. One of the things that's discussed in Beowulf, and it's alluded to in other works of history, so to speak, there's going to be a passage in Beowulf where, I'm going to give away a bit, as he lay dying, Beowulf is going to thank God that he never did certain things. And one of the things he never did is he never drunkenly slew his hearth companions, the guys who sat around the table with him. The fact that he does that, nearly all scholars suggest, means that was fairly common among Germanic people. You get a bunch of testosterone-laden, 20 to 30-year-old men with swords and axes, and they're throwing back tankards of beer. What's going to happen? Mine's bigger than yours, my sword, whatever. And they start arguing, and they kill each other. A book called Germania, or On the Germans, by a Roman historian named Tacitus, written around 90 to 100 AD, describes the Germanic people. And Tacitus offers all this praise for the Germans. Now, there's two reasons for that. One is he is impressed. Two, Rome is a cesspit by that time. Rome is morally bankrupt. And he's going, look at these Germans. Oh, they know how to fight. Whereas we have to hire them to fight our battles for us. But it's not all praise, because he describes warriors sitting around in a hall, getting drunk and slaughtering each other. Okay? So, you need to have moderation in your hatred for your foe so that you don't do what? You don't become inhuman to that foe. How do you become inhuman to a foe? We saw it in Somalia with the Black Hawk Down in 1993. We saw it in Iraq in 2005 or so. When you desecrate your enemy's bodies. The idea of the dead deserve kind of these sacred rights goes back thousands of years. It's in the Iliad. Achilles gets really pissed off. Okay? And he drags Hector behind his horse around the field until Hector's got a little piece of his body falling off. And he did that because Hector killed Achilles' lover, Patroclus. Lover/best friend, Patroclus. Okay? Hector's father has to come to Achilles at night in disguise and beg him so that his son can requiescat in pacem. I had written up here the other day, rest in peace. According to the Greek tradition, if a body is not buried that soul will never be at peace. That's where you get the ideas of ghosts. Let him rest. You've done enough to him. He can't harm you now. Okay? So, though he may wish him full of fire, that is, though you may wish your foe to be full of fire. And then there's a damage in the manuscript. Or his friend consumed on a funeral pyre. The reason you would want your friend consumed on a funeral pyre, Anglo-Saxon pagan tradition, cremation of the bodies. You raise up a big old bonfire, essentially. You put your friend, and if your friend had enemies, they can be burned along with it, but they don't get a place of honor. They become part of the fuel, so to speak. Okay? Usually, though, if they're really bad enemies, you leave them out to be eaten by the beasts of burden. The eagle, the raven, and the wolf. Fate is greater, that's weird, is the word there, is greater, the maker mightier than any man's thoughts. And then we get a break again. So, one of the things I'm curious about, do we have one speaker, two speakers, three speakers? Let us consider where we should have our home. Now, up until this point, what has the speaker been saying about our home here? What happens to it? It rots and falls and decays. I mean, the reason middle of the poem where the speaker says, I cannot imagine the man on land, the trees are blooming, it's springtime, everything's going great. What's going to happen? Fall's coming. Winter's coming. Let us consider where we should have our home, and then think how we might come there. Where do we want our home to be, and how do we get there? What's the speaker talking about? If home isn't here, but home is over there, how do you get from here to there? You go on a journey. And if that's really home, it becomes a pilgrimage. Okay? And let us also strive to reach that place. Now we're told what the speaker means by home. Of eternal peace, unending blessedness, where life is found in the love of the Lord, hope in heaven. Thanks be to the Holy One, that he has so honored us, ruler of glory, eternal Lord, throughout all time. Amen. And you get that final stanza, and it's pretty clear. Well, maybe it isn't, but what's the speaker been talking about the entire poem? Why does the speaker go out and do these ascetic feats? Prove himself to God. Prepare himself for what? The final journey. The seafaring is a pilgrimage. The homeland he is seeking isn't the homeland around here. Why not? Because I can go from home A to find a new home B, and what's going to happen to home B? Eventually, it's also going to fall. Both poems are ultimately about what regarding life here? It's going to end. And everything here is going to end. So if you want stability, if you want real foundation, real firmness, real permanence, you're not going to find it here. Go back for a moment to the passage in Bede where the priest Koifi is talking to his king about the difference between the two stories. The pagan story, the Christian story that he's just heard. The pagan story ends where? Darkness, chaos, ultimately Ragnarok. And from what we discussed the other day, possibly not a good ending. Frost giants, dwarves, orcs win. The other story, where life is found in the love of the Lord, hope in heaven. Joy, peace, happiness, essentially the end of the book of Revelation, the wedding feast of the Lamb. That vision, the wedding feast of the Lamb in heaven, where there's a huge for lack of a better word, party, parallels what? Well, doesn't quite parallel. Has a parallel in what in the Germanic tradition? Who fights in Ragnarok along with the gods against the frost giants, the dwarves, the monsters, chaos, etc.? Hell. If they're alive, human warriors and dead warriors. Where do the dead warriors come from?
Valhalla.
Valhalla.
Big meat hole in the sky.
Anybody know what Valhalla means?
Hall of the Slain.
Hall of the Slain. The Val here is related to that word, Wal. Okay? The Wanderer talked about the battlefield, the place of slaughter, the Walbanen. Okay? The Hall of the Dead. But not all dead. The only people who went to Valhalla were warriors. And there were requirements that had to be met.
Where did everybody else go?
Hell, but not the Christian idea of hell. Hell's the underworld. It's just a really, really cold place. I mean, really cold. Think 5 degrees below zero and all you have on is a hair shirt. And there's nothing to do.
Kind of uncreative.
Like limbo. But limbo's for those who are not consigned to hell. Christian hell. Limbo's for those outside and all they do is walk around and, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? For all eternity. Okay? For a warrior to go to Valhalla, he had to die with his sword or axe or dagger, a weapon in his hand. We know this because of a lot of the Viking literature, the Old Norse literature that survives, the sagas and such. There will be moments of mercy or grace given to one's enemy. The guy's down there, he's been pierced with arrows or spears, and he's on his last breath, and the enemy will put his sword in his hand. Why? So that he can rest in Valhalla. And you'll even hear enemies say to each other in Valhalla, where they'll go and they'll just drink with Brunhild and all the Valkyries until it's time to go die again, essentially. Okay? All right. Elegies. They're lamenting what? What kind of loss?
Friend, home.
The loss of life here. They're lamenting the impermanence of human existence. Okay? Dream of the Rood, a couple pages over. So that was
What?
40 minutes. The Dream of the Rood. This poem survives in, I'm trying to remember exactly how many, I think 3 different locations. One, the manuscript, it survives entirely. Okay? There's a cross in southwestern Scotland, town called Dumfries in the Shire of Dumfriesshire. The cross was originally, I don't know if your introduction mentions how tall it was, 20-some feet tall, erected, we don't know exactly when, but probably around 700. 700 to maybe 725. Big stone cross. You got a little picture of it in your book. I've got a bunch of stuff I need to post to D2L and I keep forgetting to, including some pictures. And in the cross, or on the stone cross, you've got imagery carved on the 2 main faces, and arms are like this, and you've got imagery carved on the sides also. The cross was destroyed, not quite destroyed, but knocked down during the Protestant Reformation. One of the things Henry VIII had done was monasteries were destroyed, crosses were hacked down, etc. Okay, because they were thought to be idols, the crosses and such were. But the Dream of the Rood, a portion of the Dream of the Rood is inscribed on this cross. Some scholars suggest that the portion of the poem that is inscribed on the cross may be later than when the cross was erected. Okay? That is a minority perspective. The majority perspective is it was carved, and the runes were carved in it at the same time as the cross was raised. Because if they weren't carved until after the cross was erected, that means somebody had to get up on scaffolding to reach the very top to go down. Because like I said, it's like originally 27, 28 feet tall. Okay? Now they built a church around it, a little chapel. All right? So, this is an example of the poetic genre, so to speak, or technique of prosopopoeia, all right, where an inanimate object speaks. So, like, the book speaks, so to speak. I'm not literally meaning the thing itself just starts talking to you. Okay? There's a couple of other examples in Old English literature where, like, a piece of wood speaks. It just starts talking, so to speak. This is the dream of the Rood. Rood is the Scottish name for cross. Okay? Go to a Scottish church today. Go to Edinburgh. Go to St. Giles Cathedral, which is right in the center of Edinburgh. And you'll see what's called the Rood screen. And it's a thing that blocks the nave of the church where the parishioners sit or stand from where the clergy are doing their business up by the altar. Okay? The Rood screen was not meant to be a wall. Okay? It's where a cross would be hung or displayed, and icons. It's kind of a visual reminder of what you're there for, right? So this is the dream of the Rood. Now, it's not the Rood, the cross, dreaming. It is a dreamer dreaming that the cross of Christ speaks to him. Okay? It's one of the most beautiful pieces in Anglo-Saxon. And it begins with the word, as do the Old English Andreas and Beowulf. What?
What?
Exactly. That is modern English what? What? Starts with an H because it was originally pronounced just like modern English who, W-H-O, was pronounced wha. So you have that initial aspirated sound. That initial aspiration in those words drops out in the Middle English period because of what? That I've already mentioned. What does French never allow? An initial sound. So the French heard that, and we're like, no, wah. Whale, whale, W-H-A-L-E. That's why W-H-A-L-E sounds the same as W-A-I-L, okay? So, what? All what means is, well, you've got listen. It could be listen, it could be low, it could be, there's even an adaptation of Beowulf that begins, yo.
What?
Okay? It could be, I think it's crystalline. It could be that. You try to get people's attention at a gathering, they're all talking and there's a lot of noise. You do something it's an attention gathering device. That's all it is. Okay? I will speak of the sweetest dream, what came to me in the middle of the night, when speech bearers slept in their rest. I'm going to pick on the translation again. Speech bearers. Pretty sure, I'm not going to look up. Speech bearers is Reord Berindra. Berindra means bearers. Reord means voice or speech. He's translated it literally. What does it mean? Keep going. So speakers Like a pile speaker that you attach a sound system to? Nope. Us. Us. So if the meaning is us, why do this? He's trying to maintain the use of Old English what are called kennings. And I mentioned those the other day. Metaphor of a metaphor. When humans, what? Slept. So, I will speak of the sweetest dream what came to me in the middle of the night. The Old English is, it yemata me. It happened to me, this dream. The dream does not come from within the speaker. The dream comes from outside. Okay? It seemed, notice that verb, subjunctive verb, indicates a condition contrary to fact. It's not literally happening. Why? Because it's a dream. It seemed that I saw a most wondrous tree raised on high, wound round with light, the brightest of beams. Like a beam of wood. All that beam, or is it the beam, the light? All that beacon was covered in gold. Gems stood fair at the earth's corners, and there were 5 upon the crossbeam. So why are there gems standing at the earth's corners? Well, first of all, we would say the earth isn't square, so how does it have corners? How many corners, so to speak, does a cross have? 4. The speaker is telling us something about his position, his body position. He's lying on the ground. Where are the 4 corners? North, south, east, west. What's he saying about this cross, this vision that he had?
Had another direction?
Nope.
Another corner?
So the cross has 4 points. 1 point is touching the horizon there. 1 point is touching the horizon behind him. The other 2. So this isn't like an 8-foot cross that he's seen. This thing spans the horizons. It's huge, right? Probably. And he sees gems. Well, why are there gems? Hands, spikes lead to what? Blood. Ankles, spikes, or spike, lead to what? Blood. Crown of thorns, spike, leads to what? Blood. And there were 5 upon the crossbeam, okay? All the angels of the Lord looked on, fair through all eternity. Notice your gloss. These lines are difficult and much debated. Another possible translation. All creation eternally fair beheld the Lord's angel there. Now that second translation is not as favored because of what it portrays as the cross. The cross has become what? Let me back up. The cross and or who is upon the cross. In that translation become what? Angel. But what does angel again literally mean? Messenger. So is Christ an angel? Yes, he is. Definitely a messenger of God. Is the cross an angel? Yes, it is. Why else would the majority of the world's Christians wear crosses? Okay? So, all the angels of the Lord, that is, the fair ones in the sky possibly, looked on, fair through all eternity, that is, they are beautiful through all eternity. Why? Because they don't leave heaven, the angels. They're still there, blessed in heaven. The fallen angels, the demons, aren't fair. So, that was no felon's gallows. A felon. Someone who'd committed a crime, been found guilty, and executed. But holy spirits beheld him there, men over the earth and all this glorious creation. Now, is that a serial listing of 3 things that beheld him? Or is the men over the earth and all this glorious creation and a positive for the Holy Spirits? It's unclear. Okay? I think it's a series. If I had edited this, I would have after over the earth a comma. Okay? To indicate that it's a series of three. So that Holy Spirits, the angels, beheld him there, men over the earth beheld him there, and all this glorious creation beheld him there. Wondrous was the victory tree. We would say wonderful. Victory tree. How so?
The tree meant to represent victory.
Okay, how so?
Over sin.
Victory over sin, victory over death. Okay? And I was stained by sins. Who's the I?
The guy having the dream.
It's the dreamer. So the dreamer looks at this. He sees the cross. Has he mentioned Christ? Maybe, but not literally, not overtly. And the speaker comes from looking at the cross to doing what? Looking inwardly. Because the cross forces him to do what? Acknowledge his sins. Wounded with guilt. I saw the tree of glory honored in garments. How is it a tree of glory? Well, if you know your New Testament, Christ says as he approaches the cross, I don't mean literally as he's walking towards it. I mean as he's making his way to Jerusalem and in his prayers, talking about the glory he will receive. The cross is his glorification, not his humiliation. Okay? I saw the tree of glory honored in garments, shining with joys, bedecked with gold. Gems had covered worthily the Creator's tree. What kind of garments would you put on a cross? Or what kind of garments is this cross wearing?
Jewels and gold.
Exactly. Jewels and gold. Okay? Not clothing per se. Gems had covered worthily the Creator's tree. Why the Creator's tree? According to traditional Christian theology, Jesus is what? God. Fully God, fully man. Mystery. Try to reason that through. And yet beneath that gold, so he's looking at the tree, he's lying on the ground, he's looking at it, and he sees the gold, he sees the gems, okay, and says, beneath the gold, I began to see an ancient, wretched struggle when it first began to bleed on the right side. Why the right side?
So isn't that where
That's where Jesus is pierced with the lance by the centurion. Okay? What's the ancient struggle? Is it the centurion stabbing him? Or is it a more ancient struggle? When it first began to bleed on the right side, I was all beset with sorrows, fearful for that fair vision. Why? So he's beset with sorrows, he's fearful of, like, what does it mean? Why else? Stained with sin, wounded by guilt. This is kind of like Jesus coming up to him and going, see, you did this to me, Being a bit facetious there. I was all beset with sorrows, fearful for that fair vision. I saw that eager beacon change garments and colors. Is it like the cross says, hold on there, goes and does a quick change and comes back out? No, what's it doing? You've all seen, in fact, I think our licenses have them now. You've all seen, little holographic cards, or cards with a holographic image, where you shift it and the light changes, and here you see one thing, and then you see something else. That's what's happening with the cross. At one moment, he sees what? The cross covered with gold and gemstones. And the next moment, he sees the cross covered with what? Blood. Or, are the gemstones the drops of blood? Now it was drenched, stained with blood, now bedecked with treasure. The whole thesis of the Holy Grail, the myth of the Holy Grail, it's a holy grail. Why? Because it caught the blood of Christ. Grail's just a platter, by the way. It's not a cup. All the stories that have it, around, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and it's a carpenter. No, it's total nonsense. Those are bad translations. A grail is like a serving platter. So, according to the myth, somebody, Joseph of Arimathea, stood there and held out this platter so that blood would drip into it. Okay? So,
Why?
because it's precious. If you believe that Christ is the Son of God and the Son of God is bleeding, take that blood and store it and honor it and treasure it, etc., just like they did with Joseph's bones when Joseph's bones were removed from Egypt back to the land of Israel when they went back after the 400 years in Egypt, 420 years in Egypt. So he says, now it was drenched, stained with blood, now bedecked with treasure, and yet lying there a long while, we don't know how long that is, but all night long, I beheld in sorrow the Savior's tree, until I heard it utter a sound. The best of woods began to speak words. So the first 27 lines are spoken by the human dreamer. And then we get the tree speaking. And the tree says, it was so long ago. Like, is the tree, just an old tree, It was so long ago, I remember it well, that I was felled from the forest edge, ripped up from my roots. Now, we would call this what? What literary technique is this? Personification. We're ascribing memory and words and actions to the tree. So what's the tree doing? I remember when I was just a wee 4 years old from the acorn, It's not an oak tree, by the way. It's a different kind of tree, which we'll talk about in a moment. And he says what? I was felled from the edge of the forest. Strong enemy seized me there. Really? What kind of enemies? I mean, I don't mean what kind strong, but like who? Who made the tree into a cross?
Carpenter?
Romans. Could have been Roman carpenters, but probably Roman soldiers. Doesn't take much carpentry skills to make a cross out of 2 beams of wood. They made me their spectacle, made me bear their criminals. They bore me on their shoulders, set me on a hill, enemies enough fixed me fast. We know what the hill is, it's named in the New Testament. Then I saw the Lord of mankind hasten eagerly when he wanted to ascend upon me. Okay? So, I'm going to put verses, but I don't mean verses like in opposition to or in contrast to. We're going to have 2 different depictions of Christ. We're going to see several of these. Okay, the one, Lord of mankind or God, human hero or man, and the speaker is going to keep emphasizing these, and it's going to go back and forth. Right? We stop beginning with line 18, the Creator's tree. That would be God. Okay? So, then I saw the Lord of mankind, line 33, I think, hasten eagerly when he wanted to ascend upon me. Lord of mankind. This is kind of both. Lord of mankind means the Lord of all humanity, but it also implies also has to be human too, right? And this Lord wants to do what? He's moving quickly to the cross. Why? Because he wants to ascend. Okay? Notice he's not being dragged, kicking and screaming. No. How does a cross kill you? How does crucifixion kill you?
on it? I thought it was.
Yes.
Like suffocation.
Why do you suffocate? Anybody know?
You have to hold yourself up.
Diaphragm will eventually start to.
So think this is a cross, okay? Imagine there's a cross beam, but the cross isn't, 8 feet tall. Cross is probably 10 or 12 feet tall. So you've got this cross, you've got this here. There is not a footrest. There's not something to stand on. So if you've got, say, a 10-foot beam, no, it needs to be taller. A 12-foot beam, how much of that has got to be in the ground in order for it to stay upright? If you've ever sunk fence posts, I've sunk hundreds of fence posts in my life. For a 6-foot fence, so 2 inches taller than me, for a 6-foot fence, you need an 8-foot post and you need to sink that generally at least 2 feet. So if it's 12 feet, and it's a big, thick, probably 8 to 10 inches in diameter, or if it's hewn into a square, you need at least 3 to 4 feet whole. So how do you go about the process of crucifying someone? You lay it on the ground, you hold the person's arms out, you pound the stakes through the wrist, not through the palms, because you do it through the palms and it's going to rip right through the ligaments. I mean, that's not strong enough. You do it here and it'll hold, okay? So you pound, feet like this through both ankles at once, okay? So they're on the ground there, now starting to bleed, hurts like hell, but it's not going to kill you. That is not going to kill you by any means. You're not even going to bleed to death from that, okay? Unless you're there for like days and days. Then you lift up that post. So you've got to have a hole. Now, 3 to 4 feet deep. So the person's on the cross. You lift it up, and then what happens once the beam breaks past kind of this point and you get it straight? It falls. Okay? And when it falls and you're hanging like this, what immediately happens? Both your shoulders are just dislocated. When that happens, you can no longer go and get good deep breaths. All you can do is go. You get just enough oxygen to live.
The Romans were real creative when it came to.
Oh yeah, they had great ways of killing people. And you can last like that. Well, I mean, you could die of thirst before you die of the pain of that. Nero used to put Christians on crosses leading up to his home.
And then he lit them on fire, right?
Well, some, but others he just, let hang there and slowly die. Okay? Others he did, Nero was a real word. So, the Lord eagerly moved to that, the speaker is saying. All right? The cross is saying. I saw the Lord of mankind hasten eagerly when he wanted to ascend, 46. When he wanted to ascend upon me. I did not dare to break or bow down against the Lord's word. When I saw the ends of the earth tremble. Why does he not dare to break or bow down? First of all, what does that imply on the part of the cross? It's an easy question. Believe me, don't try to go real deep. It can move. It could have if it wanted to. It could have said, hell no, I'm not killing Jesus. I mean, lays down gently. So, I don't know how, but I dare not. Against the Lord's, what's meant by word?
His
Command. Why? Germanic, fourfold ethic. Number 1, duty to your Lord. What's the cross saying about the guy who's now nailed to it? It's my Lord too, and I couldn't disobey. It's the reason he was eagerly hastening to ascend to the cross. It's what he came for. My hour is not yet at hand, Jesus says repeatedly, and then he's like, all right, now's the time. And the gospel writers say he set his face towards Jerusalem. That means no other distractions. So, then the young hero made ready. Let me back up. Easily I might have felled all those enemies, yet fast I stood. To me, it's one of the most enigmatic lines in this poem. How? How could he have felled those enemies? I mean, does the cross know jujitsu or something? And does it start? How's it going to take out these Roman soldiers? But I stood fast. Then the young hero, man, so we've already had this before. Now we have then the young hero. Who's he mean? Okay, it's Jesus. Why is he describing him as a young hero? He's 33 years old and he's being described as a Germanic warrior. Your local lord. He did what? He made ready. Strips off his clothes and says, all right, nail me to the cross, And then we get, that was God Almighty. So Germanic hero, but also God Almighty. Metaphorically Germanic. Obviously he's Jew. Okay? That was God Almighty, strong and resolute. The God Almighty part isn't what is being referred to as strong and resolute, because God doesn't need to be strong and resolute. But a human hero does, especially when facing immediate, excruciating pain and death. He ascended on the high gallows, brave in the sight of many, when he wanted to ransom mankind. Ransom, buy off, pay the price. I trembled when he embraced me. Think of that language. Embrace means what? Death. He puts his arms around. And there are some idiotic literary critical articles of this, the homoerotic Christ in the tree. It's just, don't go there. Don't look for those to do an article on, to do your review of articles on. So, I trembled when he embraced me, but I dared not bow to the ground. Again, what's the cross telling us? It wants to bow down to the ground. It wants to let Christ off, but I dare not. Dared not fall to the earth's corners. I had to stand fast. Why? That's what it was raised for. Raised here, and possibly raised in the edge of the forest.
So it's like, sort of like retelling Christ and his, basically like retelling like Christ and his, I can't think of
Passion?
passion through this tree.
To some extent. The cross is going to move on in a moment. So it says, I was reared as a cross. That is, reared this way. Lifted up, made into a cross. But it can mean my reason for existing was to be a cross. I was always going to be this cross. Okay? I raised up the mighty king. Could be both, but I think it's this one. The Lord of heaven. Now that's pretty clear. That's that one. Notice, it's almost one-to-one. Every time the cross refers to Christ as man, it gets balanced by referring to Christ as God. Why? Just let that question sit for a bit. I dared not lie down. That's like the third time the cross is suggested. I don't want to do this. I want to let him off. Okay? Why 3 times? What do these possibly imply? And it never hit me until just now. I've been teaching this poem for, this is what, 30 years, because I used to teach it at the graduate level. If he's thinking about, I can let him down, what is that? Christ faces it right after he's baptized.
This is, wait.
Temptation. cross is being tempted. Let him down. Let him go. Don't do this. He doesn't want you to do this. Okay? Possibility. I'm not saying it's literally the case. I'm saying that's a possibility of what the cross is suggesting by these, but I can't. Like something's going, come on, you can let him down. You don't want him to die. Look how nice he is. Then the other part says, no, he gave me this order. I raised up the mighty king, the Lord of heaven. I dared not lie down. They drove dark nails through me. Through implies what? Here comes out here. Through all of the cross? I mean, did the nails go through one side of the cross and stick out the other side? This language is, I'm going to make a new word, identificatory. It's identifying the cross with, because who did they drive the nails through? Christ. The scars are still visible. If you're familiar with the Gospel of John, after the resurrection, you know, Jesus appears to Mary and the other women. They run and tell their disciples. They don't believe him. Jesus shows up. Thomas isn't there. 8 days later, Thomas is with the other disciples / apostles. And the first time when Thomas, he was like, I'm not going to believe it. I can't believe it until I see the holes in his hands and put my hand in his side. Okay? And then it's 8 days later. And they're all in the same room. Doors are closed. And Jesus appears. And he taps Thomas on the shoulder. He says, do it. Put your finger in that hole. Put your hand in my side. Thomas says, my Lord and my God. And Jesus says, blessed are you because you've seen and believed, but more blessed are those who haven't seen and believed. Okay? Dark nails drove through me. The scars are still visible. He's saying, put your fingers. Feel these things. The scars are still visible. Open wounds of hate. I dared not harm any of them. Who's the of them? The open wounds of hate? No, because that doesn't make any sense. The makers of the open wounds of hate. The Roman soldiers. They mocked us both together. I don't know. You go back and read the Passion accounts in the Gospels, and I don't think you ever hear anybody saying, ha, you dirty son of a splinter, you know. They mocked the tree. They're not mocking the tree, they're mocking Christ. But again, what is the cross doing? It's identifying with Christ. Why? What does it want the dreamer to do?
Make that connection.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Identify with Christ. I was all drenched with blood flowing from that man's side after he had sent forth his spirit. Into your hands I commend my spirit, and Jesus dies. Much have I endured on that hill of hostile faith. The cross is still speaking. I saw the God of hosts cruelly stretched out. Darkness had covered with its clouds. The rulers, corpse. So this one isn't matched yet. That shining radiance. Shadows spread, gray under the clouds. Why? What happened at the crucifixion? The sun went dark for 3 hours. All creation wept, mourning the king's fall. Christ was on the cross. That is the thematic center of the poem. Christ was on road. Christ was on the cross. Christ there, it's both. And yet from afar men came hastening to that noble one. Who are the men who come from afar, hastening to Christ, hanging on the cross? Joseph of Arimathea gets approval of Pilate to take the body down, and they bury him. I was all beset with sorrows, yet I sank into their hands. They take the cross down so it sinks to the ground. Humbly, eagerly, there they took Almighty God. How's that for paradox? There they took Almighty God, lost my place, lifted him from his heavy torment. The warriors then left me, standing drenched in blood, all shot through with arrows. They laid him down, bone weary, stood by his body's head. Those are, pretty much that. They watched the Lord of heaven there we are back over there, who rested a while, weary from his mighty battle. That's litotes. He rested a while. Means, requiescatum pacem. He's dead. It's that kind of language that gives people like Dan Brown a little opening, the whole Da Vinci Code and everything. Jesus didn't really die. He got up from a nasty headache and hangover, and then he went off and married Mary Magdalene and whatever. They began to build a tomb in the site of his slayer. They carved it from bright stone, set within the Lord of Victories. If he's the Lord of Victories, why are they burying him? Different kind of victory. They sing a dirge for him, wretched at evening. Germanic custom, and then later Anglo-Saxon custom, when your Lord dies, and if you bury him, or if you have a funeral pile, they do this too, you ride or walk around the funeral and sing a funeral hymn or song. Okay? So that's what they're doing. What are we seeing? We're seeing a burial of a Jew described in Germanic fashion. Wretched evening, they wished to travel hence, weary from the glorious Lord. He rested there with little company. More litotes. How little company did the Lord rest there with? Goose egg. Okay? As we stood, who's the we? Cross is speaking.
Royally,
Nope.
or his disciples, maybe?
Cross doesn't have any disciples.
No.
And none of the disciples were at the
Isn't he also?
crucifixion
there's
except for
other
John.
crosses with him?
Louder?
There are 2 other crosses.
The other crosses. There were 3 crosses, right? We stood there. They heard the song ascending from those warriors. The corpse grew cold. The fair lifehouse. Then they began to fell us all to earth. Who's the they? It's not addressed. Okay? A terrible fate. And what happens? They dug for us a deep pit, yet the Lord's friends found me there, adorned me with gold and silver. This is a tradition of the church that is being alluded to. This has nothing to do with Germanic mythology or Jewish mythology. Okay? Who dug for us the pit? This isn't the disciples or followers. This is the Romans. So they dig a pit and they throw the 3 crosses in. And yet the Lord's friends found me there. When? Approximately 300 years later. The Lord's his friends, Saint Helena, mother of Constantine the Great. Okay? She received approval from her son, the emperor. Before he became a Christian, he had become a Christian until he's on his deathbed. He made Christianity a legal religion, and then he made it the state religion. That's why we have, quote unquote, church-state problems today. It goes back to the 4th century, literally, okay? She asked him, I want your approval to search for the cross of Christ. Okay? He said, by all means, go for it, Mom. And so, using available evidence that is talking to people who had great grandparents and such living in the area at the time, they knew the general area where to dig, according to the traditions of the church. They dig this hole, and they, lo and behold, do find 3 crosses. How do you know which one's Jesus? Does it say, I bore Jesus on it? Well, if it had the little sign that in one of the Gospels was put above Christ's head that says, King of the Jews in Latin, Greek, and Aramaic, that would be the one. But they don't find one with that, all right? So they come up with this idea. They're going to have the Patriarch of Jerusalem, essentially like the Pope, okay, but of Jerusalem. hold up each of the three crosses. And they're going to have people with various illnesses come and fall under the shadow. So the son's back here. He's holding this cross, standing here, holding the cross, and the cross forms a shadow on the ground. People fall, walk under the shadow. Where's the basis for this? The New Testament. People fell under either Paul and Peter or just Peter's shadow and were healed, according to the epistles. Anyways, so they come under the other two crosses and nothing happens. They're still just sick as ever. People come under the other cross and they're immediately healed. That's determined to be the cross of Christ. Okay? And there are 2 days in the church calendar that celebrate the cross. One is September 14th, and that's celebrated in all the Catholic churches and all the Orthodox churches. And there's another one in Lent, okay? Third Sunday of Lent in the Orthodox tradition. I don't know what it is in the Catholic tradition. That are because of this event, supposedly. All right? We have 1 minute. Let's see. We get a shift at that point. After the cross says, friends had found me there, adorned me with gold and silver. Those are the garments that the dreamer has seen. Now look at the next word. Now. Now means what?
Right now, it's just happened.
Present tense. Everything the cross said to that point was in the past. Now the cross is going to speak present. And the cross is going to tell the dreamer to do something, which is what we'll discuss on Wednesday. I'm gonna make live a quiz, probably this afternoon. That'll be due, I don't know, Wednesday or Thursday night. That's over Wanderer and Seafarer. Okay? Did I see a hand? Okay.
I was gonna ask about that, so that whole thing we just talked about Ross saying, was he not saying that to the dreamer?
Yes, but it was relating the past.
Okay.
Everything until the end of line 77, I think it's 77, yeah,
Okay.
is all in the past. He's relating history.
Okay,